the overriding question on the panel is going to be, why you're using Frog. Why do you need Frog when you've got access to things like Teams and Google Meet and all of these things? So I'm really excited to unpick that, because it's a big question. If you have got these platforms, why do you actually need these other things to sort of work with you and support you and all that? And I'm really hopeful that we can hear and get responses from Tizzy and George and Phil and Mandi and Sarah around all these things. What's fantastic as well with the panel is that it's really diverse in terms of types of children and schools and settings in which these various colleagues come from. So George, Digital Platforms Coordinator at Greenshaw, Matt, lots of schools in Sutton, thinking about his sort of catchment. Then we've got Phil at Cramlington Learning Village up in Yorkshire. I say up because I'm down in Somerset, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm down this neck of the woods, all right. And then we've also got with us Tizzy Silvester, Assistant Principal at Frederick Gough School, Mandi Kirby, joining us from the Arbor School in Dubai, where she's the head of middle school. And then Sarah joining us again. I hope you did manage to get that glass of water, Sarah. Joining us from the River Tees Mats, and not CEO, but you're the standards lead across the trust, as I believe your title will be. So thank you very much for all of you for joining us. Let's jump straight into that big question, and I'll ask it first of all to George and Tizzy. Tizzy, if you could answer the question first, and I'll jump to you afterwards, George, if that's okay with you. Why have you got Frog when you've got access to things like Microsoft and Google in your schools?
Well, actually, during lockdown, we were asked the same question by lots of people, and our answer really is that it is bespoke. It's it does whatever we want it to do. So we're able to amend it, we're able to change it, personalise it, and I actually find sometimes with Google and Teams it seems quite clinical, whereas actually for Frog it feels quite comfortable and homely, and for the child engaging with that, they seem to find it easier to navigate therefore their way around, because it's all the colours are engaging as well. What we do with it is up to us as a school, and therefore we make it really what's going to work for our children in our setting. And I think that's really key. It's been brilliant in terms of an engagement with those students. They've really bought into it, and the more adaptations we make to Frog, the more they engage with it as well. So that personal approach, I think, is fab.
That's really interesting. So I'm guessing in the fact that it's sort of really quite malleable, whereas the other offers aren't, it enables you to sort of tailor it to how you want within your school, for your context, your setting, so forth and so on.
Absolutely. And so then when we were at the last Frog conference and I heard George speak, suddenly when he was doing these amazing things at his school, we could take it back, and then I've spent the last few months sort of stealing his idea and making it relevant for our school. So actually, it's been really good that you can see what would work somewhere else and how you would use that in your setting to make it work for your children. So yeah, exactly what you just said.
Brilliant. And I guess that's part of the beauty of the Frog Academy as well, the fact that schools can work with Frog to develop bespoke things, but then can be sort of lifted and just used elsewhere in other schools. Brilliant. Thank you, Tizzy. George, same question to you then. Why do you find that why are you using Frog when you've got access to these other tools as well?
I think I'd echo everything that was just said, and I think the benefit for us, we were quite lucky that we had it well embedded anyway. So we would have been absolutely mental to go, actually, we're not going to use that, we're going to use Google Classroom, for example, in a massive lockdown. I think the main word that comes from our leadership team and from us here is the word context. I've seen other places use things like Google Classroom and Google Drive really well, but there's no context around it. It's a couple of documents on a page. There's no kind of, this is how we want you to work. We can't structure things the way we would do a normal lesson. So our lessons are quite structured. We can mirror that structure on a Frog page really, really easily. And some other platforms, we just can't bend and shape to how we want them to be. So for us, it's actually what Graham mentioned this morning, actually, about being really customizable, being able to display some data about a student right to their face, for example. We just can't do that in these bigger company platforms. And it's quite nice that Frog is quite homegrown, and we can go to them. We can go to Lucy and Graham and say, "Can we do this? Yeah, we can do that. Fine. Let's build it together and give it to everyone else." So for us, it's context, personalization, and just more friendly for the kids, really.
That's really interesting, George. Thank you. And I guess that's also, I mean, you're mirroring, like you said, similar comments to Tizzy there with the sort of the way in which you can sort of mold and shape the platform to your particular context. And context is so important, isn't it? But the thing I want to sort of follow up with you, George, is have you got any other sort of use cases alongside of how things are sort of tailored for your particular setting with across? Because you've got, so it's not just the one school within your trust, is it? Have you got any other examples there at all?
Yeah, so we've got we're actually at the moment doing quite a lot of stuff that's not actually teaching and learning based and not actually classroom focused at all. So we're looking at the moment, a lot of our systems we have inside the building, and we're moving all of those onto Frog. So a perfect example is the appraisal one is quite big, but obviously that's been mentioned already, so I won't talk about appraisals. But with even small things like we have, rather than observations, we have lesson visits, and they're more informal. So head of department might do 5 lesson visits in a week, for example. Beforehand, she would have gone to the room, written down what she saw the lesson, go back to her desk, type it into an Excel spreadsheet. No one ever looks at it. We're moving that onto a Frog-based system, where it means she's now got an iPad. We're quite lucky because we give all of our staff iPads when they start. Open up the Frog app, types it in, save, she's done. So that's one example of not teaching and learning, but it's a school system that we have moved from traditional Excel-based filling out a spreadsheet into a more dynamic-based system. And I think you'll see that across our trust, to be honest. A lot of schools are now going, actually, well, why are we doing it like that? We've done it like that for 5 years. Let's change it. So we're looking at more at the moment, more like school systems rather than teaching and learning homework. I think we got that bit nailed. It's more the other side of the more admin-based stuff now that we're trying to focus on.
Thank you, George, and that's really lovely to hear as well, because that goes back to the original sort of comment from you both about how flexible Frog is to complement lots of activities, not just to do with the teaching and learning or setting of assignments or marking of tests and all those sort of things as well. That's really useful. Thank you, George. I wanted to jump over to you for a second, Sarah. I was really privileged to get a chance to meet you and other colleagues, including the CEO at the Trust a little while ago. It's a really interesting setting, but can you share about ways in which you're using Frog beyond? Because your setting's so interesting and different to a lot of sort of standard school setups. How are you, apart from the things you've shared already, which is the sort of CPD, appraisal, onboarding, induction, all these different things, how are you using Frog with your learners as a platform to sit alongside everything else that you do?
So we have used Frog through lockdown to support our learners, and it was really useful that teachers could then set assignments through Frog. They could get the feedback through. We've been really conscious as a school to think about streamlining systems. So I'm in complete agreement with George. Frog can do pretty much anything you want it to do for your school system. We've looked at it capturing all our behaviour for us, and it can do those things. So what we've had to be really mindful of is setting a structure. So we have our MIS system, but explaining to school what that MIS system does for us. We have a data dashboard and we know what that does for us. And we've used Frog very much as the learner platform and the staff platform. So whilst we know it can go out and we can do an awful lot more than it can, that we're using it for, we've been really mindful to keep structured areas so that staff almost know when I'm dealing HR, I go here. When I'm doing this, I go here. And it has been really key, like we say, of just building that area that is about the teachers. I will be honest, we bought into other systems prior to this for lesson visits, all of those things. And like it's already been alluded to already, we were forcing ourselves to fit their structure. And the things that I would say about Frog are coming through strong already through the people that have spoke. It is bespoke to what we need. We build what we come up with the ideas, we talk with Frog, we find a way to do it, and that works for our setting. It's about our context. As you said, we're very unique. We look very, very different, but actually we can have what we need for our context. And we find real difficulty when we go out to somewhere and go, actually, we're 4 really small schools, but we're not even the size of a mainstream secondary when you add us all together. And actually, settings are very much like, oh, but we charge you as 4 schools, we work as 4 schools, you'll have 4 separate platforms. But when I've got staff that work on all 4 sites, that becomes really, really tricky. Frog allows us 1 username, 1 password, 1 platform, and it meets the needs of our context. And we can absolutely personalise it. Everything that we want is personalised to our school needs. And the other thing that I think's come through from the other speakers as well, that we would agree with, it's user friendly. You know, you quite often see all of these packages and think, how do the learners access it? How do the staff access it? I'm going to need a 4-day training session just to show them which buttons to click. It's got that interface that is really quite user friendly, and they can build anything into that. The widgets are really open in downloading YouTube into what you're doing, adding media links, adding pictures, adding PDFs, building walls for them to feed back immediately. There's so many opportunities with it. And I think as well, it's support you get from Frog. For us, the end of a phone call all of the time, that, you know, nothing is too big. We find a way. And when you work with other companies, it's like, oh, well, that's all it does, and that's how we use it. So I've found it really useful in the fact that we have very much gone now from our learners, where we had a great VLE. It shows our planning templates, it shows what the learners are accessing, it gives them opportunities to access different resources, to now a real user-friendly staff area where they can capture their learning too, and we can really celebrate reflection and development.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. There's so much there. There's some really sort of consistent themes coming through about sort of flexibility, how it's bespoke to you, the ability to sort of have access to the team and they'll work with you, making it sort of shape and fit to your particular context. I like the comment there as well, Sarah, about structure. Structure is so important for many of the learners that you have within your organisation, but actually structure is good for all of us. And certainly when it comes to adoption from your colleagues across the trust as well, having that sort of consistent structure will be really helpful too, I would assume. So really lovely comments. Thank you very much, Sarah. Jumping over to you, Phil, now. I understand personalised learning is really important to you inside your curriculum. Obviously, we've heard some of the things we've mentioned before about consistency, flexibility, and so forth and so on. But how are you using Frog at Cramlington to help complement what you're doing with learners in the school around this idea of personalised learning?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by sort of echoing some of the things we've said about it being bespoke and customizable, and you know, we're definitely tinkerers at our place. We like to customize things. We like to build our own stuff, and Frog definitely allows us to do that, and that's one of the reasons it is so good for personalizing learning. And you know, we've had Frog alongside Google for a number of years, sort of well over a decade. We use the two together, and we quite regularly review things and look and say, you know, do we need everything that we've got? And every time we have that conversation, we sort of say, you know, we can't get rid of Frog because it's so central to what we do. And that's why it personalizes things for me. We've got tools that allow us to sort of deliver content to students and to let students engage, like your Googles, like your Nearpods, like your Ed Puzzles for video. But what they don't do is really let you understand your students and, you know, the context of those students. And because Frog links with everything, it links with all of those tools, and it links with our MIS. We can pull data through, we can put our own data in. We're able to pull everything into one central place so that we have access to that information about our students. So we have something, Graham Quince actually built it for us before he left for Frog. We have something called My Classes, which pulls everything together. So on one page, you can see for every class in the school, you look at your class, you can see their reading ages, you can see their personal needs, you can see how many rewards they've got, you can see their career aspirations, their hopes, their dreams. Anything, any data that we have anywhere that used to be in disparate places is now just brought together, assessment data into that one place. So we can see everything about students, and that lets us target them for what they need and direct them to the right tools, which isn't always in Frog. Sometimes it's other tools in Google, but Frog is the kind of way that we get to those tools. And I think George mentioned this idea of it's very difficult to structure some of these other platforms like Google Classroom. And we do use Google Classroom to deliver our lessons. But what we do is we've got a little timetable widget in Frog that students see as soon as they log in. And from that timetable widget, teachers type in the classroom of their Google Classroom. so that it's always there for students. So all students do at the start of the day, they log in, they see the timetable, they click on that little link, takes them directly to their work, and then they've got all of the resources that are personal to them. And it's good to see that Frog are personalising stuff for staff now as well, with the staff development platform, which I guess is the next step, giving staff that personal professional development that they need as well.
Thank you, that's really interesting. I'm from your conversation, I'm minded to a conversation I saw on Twitter just last week, and a teacher was saying it's all very well and good children having different needs and different levels of support and whatever, but I'm a secondary school teacher. I teach 400 different students a week. Everything's hidden away in a folder somewhere. I haven't got time to read or know what all the varying needs, aspirations, etc., are for my learners. So it's fantastic to see how you're using Frog in that way to make it so accessible and easy, so teachers can deliver that sort of personalised approach to each learner. I really love that response. Thank you so much indeed, Phil. Mandi, on jump over to you now, if that's okay. And salam alaikum, as you're over in Dubai. At the school there, how have you been using Frog around parental engagement and sort of sharing people's work and the personalisation, and perhaps you can share some of the impacts that you've been noticing?
Yeah, we're new to Frog, and we're also a new school. We're only in our start of our 4th year. Our lockdown was pretty short, so by the time we got Frog in, we were back in school. We've been back in for 4 terms, so we haven't actually accessed the VLE part of Frog at all. Our 2 key priorities were the assessment and the parental engagement. We had assessment in 3 different places. Nothing spoke to each other. I found Frog and saw the assessment and went, brilliant, we can go from FS to Key Stage 4 and 5. So we've got that embedded now as we grow up into secondary. But one of the key things for us were we were back in school and the children were back in school, but the parents had no access to anything. They couldn't see what was going on. They didn't know what was going on. We had a new MIS, and like us, it was also new, and it didn't have any parent portal. So all we had with parents was emails. So what we did was, I think we drove Claire and Graham nuts, because all the things that we wanted were things that it's like, well, we don't really do that, but we can do it. So, for example, we set up for parent notice boards. There's a general notice board that goes for all parents. We have year group notice boards where heads of year post. Our primary classes have a class website, and that's where they share work on the inquiry project that's going on. So all the information's on there. That's where we post pictures of children working and their work. We set up the learning journals for FS. That was one of the first things we did. We replaced Tapestry that we had. So they were sharing the learning journey there. We then set up the EAT portfolios for all the other children. So all children regularly post 1 or 2 pieces of work they're doing during the week. That goes up there. Teachers post group pictures and things like that. We're quite lucky because we've got lots of very exciting bespoke resources. We have biodomes on the school. We have an organic farm. We have a reflection garden. So it allows the parents to see inside and see where their children are, what they're doing. We still have restrictions and masks and things and distancing, but it shows them that the children are actually having a real life. We've built in, with the e-portfolios, the parents can access all their students' academic reports, all the GL assessment parent reports we've stored up there so they can access them as well. We've added house points on there so they can see individual house points. They can see the team's house points. We've now started booking our ECA program on there. So we're trying to get the staff and the parents using this as a communication tool, and we stopped sending out emails altogether. Staff notices, cover, homework for students posted there, but we're still using Teams in the classroom because we can't collect books in and mark them and things. So we're still using that alongside Frog, but all the information and the sharing of information is done in Frog.
Thank you, Mandi. That's really interesting. And sort of given your setting, the rules from the KHDA, I mean, UAE as well is a highly competitive market for schools such as yours. What sort of feedback? I mean, we also know the importance of that triangulation between sort of school, child, and home as well. Having that sort of clear communication obviously raises aspirations, but also supports the learners so that they can achieve their best as well. Tell me, what's the feedback been from parents who've been able to access all this amazing information about their child's sort of learning in school? What's the feedback been like?
We're still in the early stages. We have some reluctant parents that still want individual feedback, but with the parents that are accessing it are quite excited, because prior to having Frog, the only information they got was at parents' evenings, or if they came in for an open day, or if we sent work home through Tapestry. We still get parents going, oh, why don't you use something like Class Dojo? It looks better and it's easier to use. But it's educating them that there is more than just the bit that they see. And for teachers, the most important bit is actually the assessment that's going on in the background that we don't share with students and parents yet, but hopefully somewhere down the line, they'll have access to that as well. But those that are accessing it are loving the fact that they can see it all in one place. The messages are all in one place. The information on their child is there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Mandi. And as a parent who had a Year 5 child using Class Dojo during the various lockdowns, I would much have preferred personally for them to have not been using that. I won't dig into that right now. That's a whole can of worms open if I start getting to that conversation. No, I'm mindful that we're almost out of time on this panel, but I wanted to sort of wrap things up at the end of this conversation, asking you if you could all to sort of share, because one of the things I love about Frog is that the idea of the Frog Academy, where you come up with ideas and you share things, and then everyone can benefit from that development. So in 60 seconds, that should give us enough time for the last 5 minutes, and I work from Tizzy to George to Phil to Sarah to Mandi. Although I feel bad actually, Mandi, being a relatively new user, so I'll start with you, then go to Tizzy, George, Phil and Sarah actually, to give you first dibs. What's your favourite use of Frog alongside what you do with other ed tech in the school, Mandi?
For me, it's the portfolios. I mean, it's really powerful because our children have Teams access, but our parents don't have Teams access. And having to communicate to parents to say, your child's done loads of amazing work, you need to go into their Teams account, you need to look at the chat notices or the assignments to see their work. It's really, really time consuming, and I find it really stressful. So just being able to regularly share work and having the students do that is very powerful, because what they choose as their best work to share each week is not necessarily what teachers would do. So actually being able to show parents things that they wouldn't be able to see is probably the most powerful thing I think we're using at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing your perspective there, Mandi. Thank you very much. Tizzy, over to you.
So this year, or last summer, we spent a lot of time creating a revision platform for our Year 11 students and Year 10s as well. So now we've moved everything to one area. So for every single subject, there are videos, there's PowerPoints or Word documents or the knowledge that the students need. And then there's a quiz or an assessment, which we saw from George last time. So we then have now created this revision platform for everything that they could need, almost to say, don't go anywhere else, go onto Frog, and everything you will need for your revision is in there. And all of our videos that our staff have created themselves, they all feature now. So anything that's going to help you to succeed in your subject areas is all in one area. I can't give any feedback as to how it's going yet, because we've only just launched it, but the feedback we've had when we've launched it's been incredibly positive. So now we just need the buy-in from students that they'll log in, they'll access, they'll use, and we'll hopefully see the end results in terms of in the summer when they start taking their GCSEs. Hopefully we'll see that impact then. So yeah, hopefully all that work we've put in and all the amazing work that Graham has done as well will showcase when the students start really using this for those exams.
Thank you, Tizzy. And I'm guessing, like I say, you're still waiting to sort of hear the impact, but knowledge organisers are so useful and helpful in education. But how lovely to have a sort of a virtual knowledge organiser where students can actually go in and everything they need for all their topics, for everything, is always there for them to refer back to. So, and again, accessible on like any of their devices they've got at home or in school and all the rest of it as well. That's brilliant, Tizzy. Thank you.
That's really a real key issue. So we're going back to the initial question. So if a child was on a Chromebook and couldn't access something, for example, We've made everything now PDF, so there's always accessibility. They can always get the documents they need, anything that they need to have for revision. So we don't have that question of, I don't know how to revise, is now all on Frog, so they can access everything. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. George, you always inspire me with your use at Greenshaw. What have you got to share?
So I'm going to say two, though don't hate me. Mark Books has been amazing this year. So from September, we said, if you want to track homework in your department, it has to be on a Mark book, on a Frog Mark book, that is. If you want to track it somewhere else as well, that's your problem, but don't moan you've got to track it twice, because we told you to do it on the Frog Mark book. Some departments haven't quite got their head around only using one system yet, which is a bit odd to me. So we now set all the homework through Frog we did anyway, but now the central place to actually track that is through a Frog Mark book. So at any time, the leadership team can jump in and have a look at it. That's been really good. Second one is sixth form. So we've set up a personal statements system inside Frog. So the kids have to write their personal statements before they put it onto UCAS for year 13. And they used to use Microsoft Word or whatever to type those up in, and their tutor could never see it and help them with it. And you get about 30 emails going between them trying to make it better. So we set up a personal statements system inside Frog where they can both see it at the same time and annotate it together as well. I think that might come out at some point as part of the academy products. I spoke to Lucy and Graham about it before, so we're happy to share that. But it's really powerful for A-level tutors to be able to see the personal statements the kids have written as they're doing them. So that's two from me, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, George. Always good value for money. And that UCAS application process is so difficult. Having been a sixth form tutor myself before, it can be so time consuming. It's almost similar to what you have when you're in year 9, not as a student, as a teacher, when you've got a year 9 tutor group. The amount of time you spend sort of working with those children around their options processes and all that as well. So that sounds really, really useful and beneficial. Thanks for sharing those two, George. Thank you. Phil, over to you. Your sort of favourite use of Frog alongside what you use else in the school?
Okay, so hard question, putting us on the spot trying to think of one, but I'll do my best. So I think, impactful wise, if I'm thinking about what's made an impact, it would be the My Classes that I've already described. There are two others that I really like at the moment. One is our CPD hub, which we've developed, but it's very similar to what Sarah's already talked about. So I'll skip that one as well. And the one I'll focus on is our learning walls. So we're a one-to-one school, and because of that, we obviously have students, we want them to use devices across all different subjects. What we don't want to happen is for students to start just doing electronic work and typing everything rather than working on paper like they'll have to do in exams and they've got to do in life and everything like that. So what we developed was what we call our learning wall, which basically has a lot built into it, things like a literacy toolkit, so it will give them help with sentence starters, help with coming up with different ways of writing things. We've got things in there like how to work as part of a team, the Debono's thinking hats and how to use those. So all of these little tools that students can use, numeracy toolkit, that they can use to supplement other work that they're doing. So while a student's working on a piece of work in English, for example, they can have this learning toolkit open alongside them and they can be referring to that, getting ideas, seeing how to learn, seeing how to improve their learning, being a little bit more metacognitive and so on. So that's my pick.
Brilliant. I really like that as well, because having that sort of a virtual reckoner, I guess, would be how I would describe it, where they can quickly refer back to things to get those sentence starters or the pi r squared, whatever rules they need to remember for maths or whatever it is. Having all that in one place and space is so helpful to have that as a reckoner. And I guess that's kind of similar to Tizzy's sharing around the revision platform. It's a source where children can go to it, be independent, sort of save teacher time. They can take control of their own learning as well. Brilliant share there, Phil. Thank you very much for sharing that. And then finally then, Sarah, over to you. Your favourite, you've shared so many things. I feel quite bad now as well, put you last on the list. Your microphone's off as well, sorry, Sarah. I don't know if you heard me there, Sarah. Your microphone's off.
Sorry. Since all my time and energy has gone into Frog courses for the last year, I have to say it's Frog courses. But again, it's that versatility. It's about building that bespoke development for our staff. And then we've also started to look at how we can then use that platform for outreach work. So a lot of schools do come to us for support with behaviour, with mental health, with SEND, because of the type of school we are. Well, actually, what we've learned through lockdown is a lot of that can be done remotely. Some of it we do need to do face-to-face. So actually, let's use Frog courses to start building that aspect that other schools can tap into remotely. Or, like we say, if we're building a safeguard course, well, every school needs a safeguarding course. So why do we all need to do that? Let's share the resources and build a platform that works for outreach.
Awesome. Listen, thank you very much for that, Sarah. And obviously, like you shared there, and lots of the things that have been created through the innovations in schools like Greenshaw and so forth and so on are all available through the Frog Academy. There's been some really sort of clear themes from the conversations today. It's been interesting as well that whilst you've got sort of Google and Microsoft running alongside what you're doing, and you are using it, the majority of the things you've been talking about have been the ways and the power in which having Frog alongside that can really help drive things forward for you in your schools. That thing around structure from Sarah, the thing about sort of the malleability, the flexibility that Tizzy and George have shared about the ability to use it for parental engagement in the ways that Mandi was sharing and the student portfolios. There's so much there. It's clear to me, if I was coming with a question, so why would I need Frog if I've got Teams or Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace? We've clearly sort of answered that question really well from the conversation on the panel today. That just leaves me to say, just to wrap up, thank you to Tizzy Silvester, George Bligh, Phil Spoors, Sarah Birch and Mandi Kirby for joining us here at Frog21 for this panel debate. I hope you found it interesting, and thank you so much for taking the time to join me and answer some of my questions. Thank you.